You're way closer to becoming the villain than you think, and once you realize how it happens, you might never trust yourself the same way again. Listen, this isn't some distant history lesson about Nazis or cults or prison experiments. Nope, this is about you, right now, because the Lucifer Effect lays it out, step by step, how good people, normal, chill, kind people, end up doing awful things. And the wildest part? Most of them didn't even see it coming. They weren't twirling mustaches or plotting world domination. They were just going along. Today we're gonna pull back the curtain on how that happens, from the sneaky little choices to the situations that flip a switch inside you without you even realizing it. And by the end, you're gonna be asking yourself, wait, would I have been the good guy? Or would I have been just another part of the problem? You probably think you know yourself pretty well, right? Like you've got your values, your limits, your line in the sand you swear you'd never cross. But you know what? That's exactly where it gets uncomfortable. Because Philip Zimbardo's work shows that those lines we're so confident about, they're softer than we think. They're more like chalk on the sidewalk than a steel fence, and under the right conditions, they can wash away. That's the real danger. Not that we're secretly evil, but that the situation itself holds more power over us than we realize. Let me walk you through what went down at Stanford in 1971. 24 students, all of them tested for psychological stability. Smart, level-headed, no red flags. These weren't troublemakers or sketchy guys. They were handpicked for being normal. They signed up thinking this was just another harmless psychology experiment. Then, a coin flip decided their fate. Half became guards, half became prisoners. No real criminals, no real authority figures, just roles. But the second they stepped into that fake prison, everything changed. The guards threw on uniforms and mirrored sunglasses. The prisoners got stripped, deloused, and assigned numbers instead of names. And suddenly, it wasn't just role play anymore. Day 1? Tense, sure, but nothing wild. Day 2? The guards were already handing out humiliating punishments, making prisoners do push-ups, shouting insults, denying bathroom breaks, and it escalated fast. Within 36 hours, one prisoner had a full-on emotional breakdown and had to be released. By day 4, they were locking guys in solitary confinement, literally a dark closet the size of a broom cupboard. Some guards made prisoners clean toilets with their bare hands. Others forced them to strip naked and chain themselves together. It was supposed to last 2 weeks. Zimbardo had to shut it down after just 6 days. 6 days. That's how quick it spiraled. And here's the wild part. No one told the guards to be cruel. No one gave them a manual on humiliation. The situation did the work. Zimbardo later summed it up with one powerful line. It's not that we had bad apples. It's that we had a bad barrel. In other words, it wasn't that these guys were secretly sadistic deep down. It was the environment, the fake prison, that pulled it out of them. And here's the chilling question. If you'd been randomly picked as a guard, do you really think you'd have been different? Sounds extreme, right? But Stanford wasn't some isolated fluke. Let's talk about another famous study, the Milgram experiment. Imagine this. You volunteer for a study on learning and memory. You're told you're the teacher. The learner is in another room hooked up to what looks like a real shock machine. Every time they get a question wrong, you're supposed to press a button and deliver a shock. Each mistake, higher voltage. At first it's mild, but pretty soon the learner starts screaming, begging, saying they've got a heart condition. You look to the scientist running the experiment, and he calmly says, "Please continue. The experiment requires that you continue." Do you stop? Most of us think, of course I'd stop. But here's the kicker. 65% didn't. They went all the way to 450 volts, even when they thought they were hurting someone, even when the screams turned into silence. Why? Because someone in authority told them to. Because the situation made obedience feel like the right thing to do. And it doesn't stop with lab experiments. Let's jump ahead to Abu Ghraib prison, Iraq, 2003. Ever heard of Ivan Frederick, U.S. Army reservist, before Iraq? Regular guy. Dad. Corrections officer back home. Zero history of violence. Nothing about him screamed future torturer. But then he got deployed. Thrown into chaos, little training, barely any oversight. The rules started to blur, and before long, he was part of the infamous team abusing prisoners' naked human pyramids, dog leashes, physical and psychological torture. And when people asked how he let it happen, he said, "I didn't feel like I was doing anything wrong at the time." Sound familiar? Stanford, Milgram, Abu Ghraib, different settings, same pattern. Ordinary people, under pressure, under authority, surrounded by an environment whispering, "This is normal, this is okay," and it changes them. We love to think, "Nah, I'd be different." But every study, every case, it all says, probably not. Because when you're dropped into a bad barrel, even the best apples start to rot. And that's the uncomfortable truth Zimbardo wants us to face. It's not just bad people doing bad things. It's people like us when the situation quietly reshapes our choices without us even noticing. So here's the real question you've got to ask. If you were in that lab, hand hovering over the shock button, if you were handed a guard's uniform, a baton, mirrored sunglasses, would you have stayed true to yourself? Or would you have become the villain and not even realized it? And if you're sitting there wondering, okay, I get that authority makes people obey, but seriously, why does it feel like people just lose their minds in groups? Let's talk about something sneakier, something that flies under the radar until it's too late. Deindividuation. Yeah, it sounds like one of those heavy academic words, but honestly, the idea is pretty simple. When your identity fades, when nobody's watching, when nobody knows it's you, you stop feeling personally responsible. And when that responsibility slips away, morality tends to slip with it. Let's rewind back to Stanford. Remember those guards? Zimbardo didn't just hand them uniforms and batons. He gave them mirrored sunglasses. Seems like a tiny detail, right? But it was brilliant. And honestly, kind of terrifying. Because when those guards put on the sunglasses, something changed. The prisoners couldn't see their eyes, couldn't connect with them as fellow humans, and maybe more importantly, the guards couldn't see themselves reflected back. Those glasses didn't just block vision, they blocked empathy. Once their individual identities got swallowed up behind the uniform and the glasses, they weren't John or Mike or David anymore. They weren't guys with their own values and limits. They were the guards, a role, a mask. And the more anonymous they felt, the crueler they became. Sound familiar? You've seen this before. I bet you've scrolled through a comment section and thought, "Whoa, why is everyone so mean here?" Yeah, that's deindividuation too. Behind a username, behind a profile pic, behind a screen, it's way easier to say things you'd never have the guts to say face to face. People harass, they bully, they pile on, because the internet makes them feel invisible. Same reason mobs smash windows during riots. Same reason hazing happens in fraternities. Same reason people post threats they never dream of saying out loud. When you're surrounded by a group wearing the same outfit, chanting the same chant, hyped up on the same energy, you stop being you. You become the crowd. And you know what? The crowd doesn't stop to think. The crowd doesn't feel guilty. The crowd just moves. Zimbardo nailed this idea with another experiment. He left an abandoned car in two very different neighborhoods. One in the Bronx, a tougher, higher crime area. One in Palo Alto, a quiet middle-class spot. The Bronx car, vandalized within hours. Stripped, windows smashed, people grabbing parts and walking off like it was nothing. The Palo Alto car sat there for a whole week, untouched, not a single scratch. Why? Because in the Bronx, people felt anonymous, invisible. Nobody felt personally responsible. But in Palo Alto, people were more likely to know each other, more likely to feel seen. And when you feel seen, you're accountable. That's the key. Visibility keeps us in check. Anonymity lowers the brakes. The more hidden we feel, the easier it is for the worst parts of us to take the wheel. And this isn't just about bad people. It's about all of us. Ever started typing something harsh in a DM and then stopped yourself? Maybe your better judgment kicked in. But what if you were 100% sure no one could trace it back to you? What if nobody would ever know? That's when the guard's sunglasses go on. That's when the username turns into a mask. That's when the crowd swallows your name. And this is the thing Zimbardo really wants us to see. We're all more vulnerable to this than we'd like to admit. Not because we're broken, not because we're evil, but because anonymity opens a door inside us, and sometimes what walks through that door isn't who we thought we were. So here's something to sit with. If nobody was watching, if you knew you couldn't get caught, would you still be proud of what you did? And here's the part that honestly makes my stomach twist a little. Because if you're still thinking, sure, I get that people obey authority or hide behind a group, but I'd never actively hurt someone, well, here's where it gets even darker. Dehumanization. It's not just about following orders or blending into the crowd. It's about stripping away someone's humanity until hurting them doesn't even feel wrong anymore. And you know what? History's full of proof. Let's start with Nazi Germany. Ever notice how the propaganda didn't just say Jews were bad or dangerous? No, it went way further. Jews were called rats, vermin, parasites. They were drawn as creepy, grotesque caricatures in posters and newspapers, and that wasn't an accident. Because once you convince a population that a group isn't fully human, once you compare them to pests, killing them doesn't feel like murder anymore. It feels like pest control. That's how dehumanization works. It sneaks in through language, through images, through casual jokes, and it reshapes how we see people without us even realizing it. And you don't have to look back that far. Think about Rwanda. During the genocide, Tutsis were called cockroaches over and over again. On the radio, in speeches, in newspapers. That word wasn't just an insult, it was a tool, a weapon, because the second you label someone a bug, you've made it easier for people to step on them without blinking. And then there's Abu Ghraib. Remember Ivan Frederick, the same guy we talked about earlier? He didn't just help torture prisoners. He didn't just humiliate them. He and his team literally put them on dog leashes, called them dogs, treated them like animals. And once again, that language mattered. Because if you can convince yourself that someone's not fully human, you're not going to treat them with human dignity. Zimbardo points to a fascinating study by Albert Bandura that shows how subtle this process can be. In the study, students were asked to oversee another group and deliver punishments for wrong answers. But before they started, they overheard the experimenter casually describe the other group. In one version, the group was called animals. In another, they were called nice guys. And guess what? The students gave harsher punishments to the animals just because of that one label. Nobody forced them, nobody told them to be cruel. That one word nudged their perception, and that tiny shift opened the door to harm. And here's the sneaky part. Dehumanization doesn't always scream in your face. Sometimes it shows up in memes, in hashtags, in the jokes people tell at work, in the little ways we start to see an entire group as them instead of us. And every time we use a label that reduces someone to an animal or a stereotype or an enemy, we make it a little easier to hurt them, a little easier to justify their pain, a little easier to stay silent when they suffer. Zimbardo warns us that language is more than just words. It's a lens. It's the filter we see people through. And when that filter strips away someone's humanity, every other moral break gets weaker. So here's what I'm wondering, and maybe you are too. How often do we hear this same kind of language today? How often do headlines, tweets, or news shows throw around words that make a group seem dangerous, dirty, inferior, and if we don't catch it, if we don't stop to question it, how far could it go? Because here's the uncomfortable truth. When you stop seeing someone as human, hurting them doesn't feel wrong anymore. That's how evil spreads. Not through monsters lurking in the dark, but through small shifts in how we talk, how we label, how we imagine them. Until one day, them doesn't even feel like people anymore. And after everything we've covered so far, the power of the situation, obedience, anonymity, dehumanization, you might be sitting there thinking, okay, is there even any hope? Or are we all just ticking time bombs waiting for the wrong circumstances to flip the switch? Honestly, that's exactly why Zimbardo didn't stop at showing us the dark side. He wanted to show us the way out too. And here's the good news. Just like we all have the potential to do harm, we also have the potential to resist, to step up, to choose differently, even when it's hard. He calls it everyday heroism. You know what's wild? Most heroes aren't the ones flying through the sky with capes. They're not dodging bullets or saving the world in slow motion. Most heroes are regular people who do one thing. They act when everyone else freezes. They speak up when everyone else stays quiet. They make a choice to care, to intervene, to risk something. And sometimes that's enough to change everything. Take Wesley Autry. Heard of him? He was just an ordinary guy standing on a New York subway platform with his daughters one day. Suddenly, a man next to them collapsed and fell onto the tracks right as a train was coming. And in that split second, Autry jumped down. He pushed the man into the space between the rails, laid his own body over him, and shielded him as the train rolled right over them. When it stopped, both men were alive. The news called him a hero. But Autry? He just said, "I saw someone who needed help, so I helped." That's heroism. No cape, no fancy speeches, just a moment where someone refuses to look away. And it's not just dramatic moments like that. Think about the White Rose resistance group in Nazi Germany. Young students who secretly printed and spread leaflets exposing the regime's crimes. They weren't soldiers. They weren't politicians. They were students. But they used their voices anyway. And even though it cost them their lives, their courage sparked ripples of hope in a sea of fear. Zimbardo's message is simple but powerful. Heroism is a choice, not a once-in-a-lifetime event, not a title reserved for the few. It's a daily decision to do the right thing, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's risky, even when nobody's clapping or watching or promising you a reward, because that's what makes it heroic. And yeah, sometimes it's dramatic, but a lot of times, it's quiet. It's standing up for someone being bullied. It's reporting something that feels wrong. It's speaking up when a joke crosses the line. It's refusing to pile on when the crowd's going in a harmful direction. Those small acts, they're like resistance training for your conscience. Every time you choose to act, you make it easier to act again next time. Here's what I love about Zimbardo's take. He doesn't pretend heroism is easy. He doesn't sugarcoat the fact that it's hard to stand up when the pressure's pushing you down. But he believes, and the research backs him up, that if we practice little acts of moral courage now, we're way more likely to step up when the stakes get high. And honestly, that's kind of the most hopeful thing in this whole story. Because sure, evil's contagious, but so is goodness, so is courage, so is empathy. Every time you choose to act with integrity, you're not just protecting someone else, you're shaping the kind of person you're becoming. So here's what I'm wondering, and maybe you are too. If that moment came, if you were the one standing on the platform, if you were the one seeing someone mistreated or pressured to follow orders you knew were wrong, would you freeze or would you step forward? Because every day, in big ways and small, we all get the chance to answer that question. So maybe the scariest part of all this is realizing how thin that line really is between good and evil, between who we think we are and what we're actually capable of under pressure. But you know what? The other side of that coin? It means every small choice matters. Every moment you stand up, speak up, push back, it strengthens the part of you that refuses to look away. And that's the real takeaway. We're not locked into one path. The same psychology that makes people fall into darkness can be flipped, used to build courage, compassion, integrity. It's not about being perfect, it's about being aware. About asking, every day, who am I becoming right now? Because the moment you stop asking is when the situation starts answering for you. If you're ready to explore why so many smart people feel stuck in life, watch this next.